Welcome back again, grade 10. So this is the beginning of our second unit. It is called Functions in Business. Before we start this PowerPoint, can you please download this paper right here, which are the lesson 1, and it is factors of production. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the factors of production. You can either download it and print it out, or just download it and have it open on half your screen. You're going to be taking notes as you watch this PowerPoint. So economic resources are known as factors of production. This is question number 1. Question number 2, the factors of production are the resources that are the building blocks of the economy. Resources are what is used to produce goods and services. Another word for resources is inputs. So what we put into something is a resource, and it is used as a factor of production. And then the output would be goods and services. And you'll remember this from when we learned about productivity. These were the inputs versus the outputs. So economics divide the factors of production into 4 different categories. The first category is land and raw materials. This is question number 3. The second category, capital resources. So these are factories and machines. This is not money. It's factories and machines. The third one is human resources. This is labor. And the fourth one is entrepreneurship. So this is the thinking or the ideas or the people or person that it takes to use all these factors of production, all these inputs, and then to produce the outputs, the finished goods or services. Just to recap what we just talked about, the factors of production are resources, and these are the building blocks of the economy. They are the inputs that people use to produce goods and services. So if you think about the ingredients of your breakfast this morning, unless you lived on a farm, and some of you do, and made them yourself, they pass through a whole bunch of different processing stages between the farmer and your table, and they were handled by different organizations. So if you had eggs this morning, been an egg farmer, it would have been somebody who buys the eggs from the egg farmer, puts them into the cartons, brings them to the grocery stores, and then your parent would have, or you might have gone to the grocery store yourself and bought those eggs. Similarly, your morning newspaper was created and delivered through an interaction of a whole bunch of different organizations. So every day we use a multitude of physical objects and a variety of services. Most of the physical objects have been manufactured, and most of the services have been provided by people in the organizations. And very often we go through our days and we're simply not aware that this even happens. So it's good to pause and to take a moment and to think about, where do all these things that we take for granted, where do they come from? Question number 4, economic systems. What are economic systems? Well, they are methods of dealing with the selection, the production, the distribution, and the consumption of goods and services in society. So we're dealing with 4 different things. We're dealing with the selection and the production, means producing it, making it, distribution, how does it get to, what are the channels of distribution, how does it get to the consumer, and the consumption, how does the consumer use the goods and services. Governments and businesses work together, and they work together to create economic activity and growth in the marketplace. So economic systems, the way that these things are produced and the way that they're consumed, must answer 3 big questions, and they are: what goods and services should be produced within the system? So in Canada, what kind of goods and services should we produce? For whom should these goods and services be produced? Who's going to buy them? And what's the most effective way to produce them? How should they be produced? And whenever anybody begins a business or begins thinking about producing a good or a service, these are the questions that they usually will think of first. I'm going to click on the link on this video here, and it will talk about Coke and how Coca-Cola was first created and what happened to it in the production of it.
The soft drink was born of the drugstore soda fountain, where pharmacists would serve up various flavors of carbonated water, initially considered a medicinal drink. These sodas became so popular that customers wanted to be able to buy them in bottles to take home. That demand spawned the soft drink industry. In 2003, almost 195 billion liters of soft drinks were sold around the world. That's 30 liters for every person on Earth. These 2-liter plastic bottles have just arrived from the bottle factory. Even though they're brand new bottles, the soft drink plant still has to clean them before filling them. This rinsing machine turns the bottles upside down, then flushes them with water the plant filters on site. Once the water drains out, the machine turns the bottles right side up again, and they make their way to the filling station. Meanwhile, in the mixing room, technicians prepare whatever soft drink they'll be bottling in this production run. Each recipe begins with filtered water. It makes up 86% of the drink. The rest is syrup. Each syrup recipe is a combination of carefully measured ingredients, natural and artificial coloring and flavoring, and one or more of various types of sugar, such as glucose or fructose, extracted from beets, corn, or cane. This machine releases the right proportion of syrup to filtered water, creating the final soft drink minus the bubbles. The drink now travels to a pressurized tank called the carbonator. There, an injection of carbon dioxide infuses the drink with gas bubbles. The carbonated soft drink now travels to the reservoir of the bottling machine. The bottles arrive and travel its carousel. The machine removes the air in each bottle, then fills it with, in this case, 2 liters of cola. Now onto the capping machine. The caps come down a chute propelled by filtered air. The machine twists a cap on the part of the bottle called the crimp, intertwining the threads of the cap and crimp tightly to hermetically seal the bottle. Next stop, labeling. The machine's roller applies cold glue to one metal plate after another. Each plate then grabs a label and applies it to a bottle. Brushes smooth edges down, ensuring the labels adhere well. Elsewhere in the plant, a machine called the uncaser unloads cases of refillable glass bottles that have come back to the factory. The cases continue toward a case washing machine. The dirty bottles head toward the bottle washing machine, where devices called cells line them up in rows of 16. Each bottle tilts and enters the washer neck first. Inside, a combination of powerful water jets and soap remove dirt and germs. Then water jets rinse off all traces of soap. As they exit, they pass in front of a neon inspection light. Workers pull any problem bottles off the line. Now the bottles head to the same bottling machine as before, only now it's been adjusted to fill each bottle with 300 milliliters of drink, in this case, orange soda. This factory takes a sample from each production run for quality control testing. The lab technicians check such things as the dilution ratio of syrup to water, the carbonization level, and the airtight seal. They also analyze the purity of the drink and container by running the sample through a paper filter. They put the filter into a petri dish containing the nutrients needed to grow microorganisms. Then they incubate at a precise temperature and observe if any bacteria grow. These glass bottles have old-fashioned bottle caps, not the twist caps the plastic bottles have. As each cap drops down onto a bottle, the machine squeezes it tightly, creating an airtight seal. Once the bottles are filled and capped, they go into shipping cases.
This brings us to question number 5, which is, what is production? Production is the process of combining various material inputs and immaterial inputs. So immaterial inputs are like the knowledge, the plans, etc. in order to make something for consumption. We call that an output. It is the act of creating an output, and an output is a good or service which has value and contributes to the function of individuals. So that would be the answer for question number 5. And if you've ever made anything, you've been involved in production. If you have put together a bowl of cereal or fried an egg or poured a glass of orange juice this morning or buttered some toast, you have produced something that was not there before. It is as simple as that. Question number 6, what are operations? So operations, or in brackets, the production management, is a systematic direction and output of the process that transforms resources into finished goods and services. And that is the answer for question number 6. Question 7 on your handout asks the question, how has technology changed the production process? Think about the video about Coca-Cola that you just watched and answer that question using some of the knowledge you gained from that video. Next is the factors of production. On your handout sheet, question 8, I think all the way down to question 12 will be answered as you watch the video. So watch, I'm going to play the video. You might have to pause it in order to find out what these factors are.
Factors of production. We know that the central theme of economics is scarcity. It's about using limited resources to satisfy unlimited ones. So what are resources? Well, in economics, when we talk about resources, it has to be productive, meaning we can use these resources to produce something. Suppose you want to sell awesome coffee to people. What do you need? Maybe a cafe? So you got to rent some place. That's land, isn't it? You also need water and electricity and of course coffee beans. What's this? Raw materials. What else do you need to sell coffee? What about coffee maker machines? Cash registers for cash transactions? So these are machines and tools that help us produce our goods, in this case, coffee. These are also what we call capital. Tools, machinery, even factories are considered physical capital. Another type of capital is human capital. It refers to knowledge and skills of people that enhance their production capacity. For instance, your knowledge on how to make awesome coffee is a type of human capital. One question. Is money considered capital? Well, in economics, resources have to be productive. Can money itself help you produce anything? No. Although you can use money to purchase resources like machines or coffee beans, money by itself cannot produce anything. So it's not considered as a type of resource. It is understandable that some of us may find this confusing because we often hear news commentators referring investment capital or financial capital to money. Yeah, in fact, in our everyday lives, we often equate money to capital. However, money is not an economic capital. In economic terms, money is not capital because it cannot produce anything, like a machine does. Rather, money is an expression of value. With money, it is easier for us to exchange goods and services. Money serves as a lubricant for the economy. Alright, once you make coffee, you need to sell it, don't you? So you need waiters, you need labor, you need to hire people. With land, capital, and labor, what else do we still lack? Who's going to bring these resources together? Who's going to organize this together and make it a productive enterprise? You. Yes, you. Who are you? Well, you are the boss, the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is also a kind of resource as the entrepreneur bears risk and brings the other three resources together to make a business work. Without entrepreneurs, no business organization can begin. Okay, I hope your coffee business is successful. Before you forget, there are 4 types of resources, namely land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Next is question number 13. What are the 4 main transformation activities? So if you look on this slide, you will see again that we talk about the inputs, which are the resources, land and raw material, capital, machines and factories, not money, human resources, labor, etc., and entrepreneurship, the person or people or business that puts it all together. They are transformed into outputs. And there's 4 different ways of doing this. There's 4 what we call transformation activities. The first one is manufacturing. It's like the physical creation of a product. So cars come to mind. In the Cambridge car plant that we went to, that was a manufacturing plant. They physically make the products. There's transport, UPS, FedEx. These are the movement of material or of customers, Uber or a taxi service. There's also the transformation activity of supply. This is a change in the ownership of goods. Whenever you go to a retail store, so this would be like a store in the mall, you buy a pair of jeans, that is the transformation activity there is supply. And then finally, there is a transformation activity of service. So this is the treatment of customers, hotels, restaurants, or the storage of materials, warehouses. And all of these are activities that take raw inputs or resources and move them into finished goods or services, which we call outputs. So we talked about the transformation process, but it's also good to think about the different types of resources that are transformed. So we had the input, the raw materials, the land, the capital, these are all the inputs that we need, but we also have different types of resources that can be transformed. The first one would be materials. So this would be the physical inputs of the process or to the process. And this would be, for example, if you're making cars, the metal, the steel that's used to make those cars, those are the physical inputs. Those materials are turned into a car. The second type of resource that's used is information. This is used in the labor process. This can also be used actually being transformed. So an example of this would be even an accountant firm where they transform information. You give them your tax information, they transform that using information, they transform it into a processed tax form, and they send that information to the government. Or customers, you would go in for a haircut, you are being transformed. You go to a hotel, you are the thing that's being transformed, you get a good night of sleep. So these are all different types of resources that are transformed. So if you think about that, then you can also think about the transformation process and then how it relates to the outputs. So the results of the transformation activities, principal output of a doctor's surgery are cured patients. The outputs of a nuclear reprocessing plant include reprocessed fuel and nuclear waste. So many transformation processes include both goods and services. For an example, a restaurant provides the service to a customer, but they also produce goods such as food and such as drinks. And here's another example of a transformation from malt to beer. What's the input? You can see that there that the transformation process has happened. Can you identify which transformation process this was? Look back to question number 13. Which transformation process was used to transform malt to the finished output of beer? In this slide, we're going to see how well you can remember what the resources are. So we're talking about input resources, and again, there are 4 of them. They're listed in question number 12. They include land, which includes natural or raw materials. Secondly is capital. This includes machines and factories. The third one is human resources. This includes labor. And the fourth one is entrepreneurship, the person it takes to put the whole thing together. So let's do the first 3 together. Coal is, if you chose land, you are correct. Michael Dell, the owner of the business Dell Computers is? If you chose entrepreneurship, you're correct. An artist is? Well, this could be either human resources or entrepreneurship. If the artist is working for a company and hired by a company to work for them as a graphic artist or somebody like that, it would be human resources. If the artist is just working for themselves, then they would be considered an entrepreneur. See how well you do with the other ones on this slide. So in this slide, we're doing the same thing as the last slide, but here we're naming the transformation activity. There are 4 of them because they're a little bit more complicated and you may not remember. They're also listed, by the way, in question number 13, but because you may not remember, I listed them on the top of this slide. So manufacture, transport, supply, or service. A RAV4 SUV would be which one? If you chose manufacture, you are correct. First choice hair cutters. Which transformation activity occurs at first choice hair cutters? If you chose service, you are correct. And see if you can do the other ones on your own. That brings us to question number 16, the scarcity of resources. And there's 2 things that we need to talk about when we talk about scarcity. So you'll remember from our last unit that scarcity actually means the unlimited desires and wants and the limited resources that are available in the world. This also has to do with supply and demand, and it also has to do with opportunity costs. So goods and services are scarce because the factors of production used to produce them are scarce. Scarcity, again, is described limited quantities of resources to meet unlimited wants. So this is the answer for number 16. And then if you think about a pair of blue jeans, the denim is made of cotton, it's grown on the land. The land and water used to grow the cotton is limited and could have been used, opportunity cost, to grow a variety of crops. The workers who cut and sewed the denim in the factory are limited labor resources. Again, opportunity cost, you could have been producing other goods or services in the economy. And the machine in the factory used to produce the jeans are limited capital resources that could have been used to produce other goods. This scarcity of resources means that producing some goods and services leave other goods and services unproduced. And this comes to supply and demand. What resources, what outputs, what things, what services, what goods should be produced and what should not. And that depends on what society or what people who are involved in this business want. What is the demand for this product or this service? So in the factors of production, again, we have 4 different factors or 4 inputs that we use in production. And the next number of slides go through this in detail, so you don't need to write it all down right away. This is going to be, the next number of slides are number 17. So maybe first write down the different types of factors of production or inputs, and then we can explain them as we go through the slides. So the first one, 17A, is land. 17A1, natural resources, and we also have direct and indirect materials. B is capital, and we also have factories and machines for B. C is labor, and D is entrepreneurship or management. A few more details about land or natural resources. So land or natural resources, and this is going to be question number 17. And I'm just going to explain a little bit more what you mean when you wrote down land. So they're natural resources, materials that come from the earth, water and air that's used in the production of goods and services. And there's some examples listed there. And normally when we talk about natural resources, we have 2 different types. One is renewable and one is non-renewable. So a renewable resource would take decades to replenish. An example of this would be forest. A non-renewable resource is a resource that cannot be readily replaced by natural means at the level of its consumption. So oil that you take out of the ground will not naturally reproduce at the same way as it's taken out of the ground. So it's called a non-renewable resource. The second part of land is raw materials. So raw materials are materials or substance that are used in the primary production or manufacturing of goods. Often we call them commodities. And there are two types of raw materials. The first one is direct raw materials. These are materials that are directly traced back to the finished product. So for example, if you look at the chair, if you're sitting on a wooden chair, you look at the chair that you're sitting on, you can see that the wood, the lumber that's used in that chair is directly traced back to the forest. It came from a tree. It is called a direct expense. But there's also something called indirect raw materials. These are items that you can't specifically trace. So an example again in your wooden chair is the wood finish that's placed on the chair. It's not that that wood finish was directly used, completely used up in that production of the chair. So it's an indirect raw material. And here you can see some factors of the production. You can see direct and indirect. Direct would be zipper, fabric, thread, rivets, everything you can see on the actual product. The indirect might be the sewing machines and the scissors that were used, paper to invoice, repair parts for the sewing machine. Those are all indirect costs of the pair of jeans that was made. B is capital. Capital is machinery, tools, and buildings that are invested in the business. Capital is not money. So capital, again, it's buildings, it's equipment, it's tools, it's trucks and cars, factories, whatever things are used to create the good or create the service is considered capital. Usually they're not materials that are used up in the creation. So thinking about the wooden chair again, if you were to use that wood up in the creation of the chair, that's not capital. Capital would be the machine that put that chair together. It's not really used up in the creation of the machine. C is human resources, as you already have written down. It often refers to as labor. They're the people who work to create the good or service. And then listed on the slide here, you'll see a whole bunch of examples. So write down a couple of those examples for C. And due to technology, a lot of human resources, a lot of labor jobs have been automated, and costs have been, and this has been done to save on labor costs. So a couple of reasons why this works well. Humans cannot always be accurate and precise when they're doing the same task repetitively for hours per day. So in technology such as industrial robots, they can, like in the auto industry, again, we saw this when we went to the factory in Cambridge, they can work around the clock. They can work with hazardous materials. They don't need breaks. There's all kinds of different things that robots can do a lot better than humans. They don't get tired. They'll keep on going. Some of the negative things of this, again, would be some of the disadvantages would be that robots can break down, and if one part of it breaks down, then the whole assembly line has to stop, and that has to be fixed. And that's why factories such as the Toyota plant have a lot of mechanics on site that are used to fix these things as quick as possible. Another thing that we talked about in our previous unit was outsourcing. This is the hiring of another company to perform tasks for the company. Sometimes this is done to other countries. We've talked about that, where factories for companies are relocated in third world countries. Other times it's just specialization. If you were running a small business, you might hire an accounting company to do your books and your finances. They specialize in that, and it would be worth it for you to pay them to do it rather than trying to do it yourself. So that would be another form of outsourcing for a small business. And another thing to mention about human resources is that in order to produce goods and services very competitively, in order to produce it most efficiently, businesses always require more information about their customers, their competition. They need to know the sources of supply. They need to know the political conditions in which they're going to work. And they also need to know new technologies. So if they have accurate and usable information, what it does is it reduces a business risk and it enhances its profitability. Before somebody starts a business, they very often make up a business plan. And that's the entire purpose of the business plan, is to reduce the risk, enhance the profitability, and to do some research on these type of things. What type of customers? What's the competition? Can my business function in this township or in this area of the province or of the world? Where can I get my supplies from? What is the new technology? And this is going to be answered in question 18. Question 18. And the last one, the last resource needed for production, 17D, is entrepreneurship or management. And these are people who run the business. They control the direct factors of production. They allocate the company resources, decide who's going to do what. They hire, they make decisions that affect the day-to-day and also affect the long-term operations of the business. And then question 19, what is intellectual property? These are the ideas or talent of a business entrepreneur. Owners and managers can use the intellectual property to determine the success or the failure of the company. So this deals also with question 18 and a business plan, and using plans like this, or using finding out more about customers and more about supplies and more about all the different factors of production that are necessary, helps the business reduce their risk when it is started. Question number 20, interdependence. This brings us all the way back to the very beginning of the course. In our very first unit, when we talked about producers and consumers, we talked about interdependence and how society relies on businesses. So consumers rely on producers, and producers also rely on consumers, and how if there is one of those people missing, either the producer or the consumer, businesses cannot function, consumers cannot function. So there is an interdependence, there is a need for each other in the business world. And it's time to test your knowledge again. Answer these following questions, or think about these questions. The first one, how has technology changed the production process? And this is question number 7. We already answered this on our answer sheet. Thinking about the Coke video that we watched, and also while you watch the video of the hot dog and L'Oreal makeup, can you think about technology and how it has changed the production process? And then before you watch the videos, question number 21, how can information be a product? Think about what we just discussed as far as a transformation activity. We talked about an accountant and how an accountant can transform information. So think about that and write down your answer to that. Now let's watch the video. And as you watch the video, it's 2 different things. I want you to write down 22A for hot dog and B for the lipstick, and write down the following 2 things. Identify the resources and the labor that's necessary to produce this good. So what resource, input resource, and what labor is necessary to produce hot dogs, and the same is for the makeup video. Here we go.
Hot dogs are an all-American fare, but most likely it was German sausage makers who first came up with the idea. In fact, there are reports of German immigrants selling them from push carts in New York's Bowery as far back as the 1860s. A century and a half later, hot dogs are still the #1 treat on the street. Traditional hot dogs are made from a mix of pork, beef, and chicken. The cuts they start with are called trimmings, pieces of meat left over from cutting steaks or pork chops. The trimmings are ground the same way butchers chop up hamburger meat, by pushing the cuts through grated metal plates. Processed chicken trimmings are added to the ground meat, followed by food starch, salt, and other flavorings. These flavorings vary depending on where the hot dogs are to be sold, because people in different regions have different tastes. Water is sprayed into the mix, and everything is blended together in a big vat. Corn syrup adds a dash of sweetness. The addition of even more water helps to disperse the ingredients and make the hot dogs juicier. Another machine then purees the meat batter into a fine emulsion and vacuums out any air. Long rolls of cellulose tubing are loaded into the stuffing machine. It pumps the meat puree into these casings, twisting it every 5 1/4 inches, the length of one hot dog. It takes just 35 seconds to make a chain of hot dogs that would span a soccer field twice. Then, three of those hot dog chains are linked together to make an even longer string, and they're loaded several at a time into another machine which drapes the hot dogs onto moving racks. The process is carefully timed so that a twist always lands on the bar. The racks shunt the hot dogs to a liquid smoke shower, then into an oven with several cooking zones. The liquid smoke seeps through the casing and adds flavor to the dogs as they bake. Hot out of the oven, these franks are drenched in cold, salty water to chill them in preparation for packaging. The hot dogs then file down to an unloading zone. Here, a machine pulls them off the bars onto a conveyor. Then, the hot dogs slide off the conveyor into metal containers. If you've been wondering about those black stripes on the casings, all is about to be revealed. The stripe is a marker attached to the casing. The absence of a black stripe means the hot dog is cooked and ready for packaging. Inside the peeler machine, a tiny knife slits each casing along the top. Then, steamy air blows the casings right off the dogs. This machine peels 700 hot dogs a minute. An inspector makes sure the casing has been completely removed and that there are no defects in the dogs. Then, it's into a device that looks like a plastic bicycle chain. The sprockets position the hot dogs for packaging. This factory manufactures an incredible 300,000 hot dogs an hour. That's close to 2.5 million per shift. They really do churn them out like sausages. Fire up the grill and a mouth-watering meal is just minutes away.
All right, so for some of us who love hot dogs, this would be a very revealing video, and for the others of us who don't like hot dogs, we might never eat a hot dog again. Although it didn't look too bad. It didn't look too bad. Okay, watch the makeup video, and then we're going to do the same thing with that as far as answering those questions.
As glamorous as it is, lipstick is still a high-technology product. A single lipstick contains more than 20 different ingredients. Makeup manufacturing calls for perfect organization. In general, there are nearly 50 different colors in a lipstick line, and 20 different pigments are needed to create those colors. And that's just one product line. A cosmetics factory makes several hundred different products. Raw materials, the basic ingredients, are inspected and tested as soon as they come into the factory. For lipstick, approximately 30 tests are necessary between the arrival of the raw materials at the factory and the dispatching of the finished products. Packaging is also inspected and tested to ensure that it meets our standards. Once the raw materials have passed inspection, the manufacturing process begins. Ingredients are listed and weighed by an employee. Oils, waxes, pigments, pearlescents. These ingredients are added to a vat in compliance with a strict operating procedure. Carefully following this procedure ensures that the mixture is perfectly homogenized. We guarantee our team members optimum working conditions that respect their safety and well-being. Numerous quality control tests are performed throughout the manufacturing process. Once the finished product is ready, samples are regularly sent to our laboratories for further testing. Protecting the environment is a priority for the group. Our factories are ISO certified 14001 and they meet the strictest international requirements for environmental safety. Pallets of finished products are brought to the storage area. From there, the products will be sent to distribution centres and then onto sales outlets. Hence, from our research laboratories to our factories, everything is geared towards putting the best of our technology into this lipstick.
Take a moment to answer the two questions for lipstick and for hot dogs. So this next video is about production. Why are we learning about production? And this next video is called the economic lowdown. And what it does is it pretty well talks about supply and demand. It talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It talks about types of businesses. It talks a little bit about international business. So it takes everything that we've learned up to this point in this course and it puts it together. So let's watch the video. While you're watching the video, if you could answer question 23 all the way down to question 30. So it's a bit of a long video. We're going to break this into two classes. So in the first class, you can do up to this point, and in the second class, we will talk about this. So we'll watch the video now and then answer those questions as you go along. You'll probably have to stop the video now and again to answer the questions.
The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis presents the Economic Lowdown. Let's face it, the economy is complex and can be difficult to understand. Luckily, economists have developed models to help us learn and understand how the economy functions. One of the most useful is the circular flow model. The circular flow model highlights the flows within the economy, the flow of economic resources, goods and services, and the flow of money. To demonstrate the usefulness of the circular flow model, let's follow a few dollars through the cycle. Imagine you are a hungry consumer who hears the homemade fries at the diner down the street calling your name. You take your money to the diner for a tasty meal. When you pay your check, you are buying goods and services, but the money doesn't remain in the cash register for long. Alice, the diner owner, uses the money to purchase resources. She buys homegrown potatoes from a farmer, pays the server who took your order his wages, and makes a payment to buy new equipment for the diner. All of these are costs of production. After she has paid her cost of production, the remaining revenue is her profit, the income she earns as an entrepreneur owning and operating her diner. Let's say your money goes to the farmer, and that for him it is income. That money won't remain in his wallet forever though. Before you know it, he will spend it, and the cycle will begin again. The circular flow model shows the interaction between two groups of economic decision makers, households and businesses, and two types of economic markets, the market for resources and the market for goods and services. While the real economy is much more complex, the simple circular flow model is useful for understanding some key economic relationships. Let's start with the two groups of economic decision makers. On one side of the model is households. Households consist of one or more persons who live in the same housing unit, such as a family. Households own all the economic resources in the economy. The economic resources are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. Land resources are natural resources. For example, these could be actual land owned by a farmer or other natural resources such as oil, water, and trees. Labor is just what it sounds like, work for which you are paid. Capital resources are goods used to produce other goods and services. For example, think of a hammer used by a carpenter or a computer used at a business. Finally, entrepreneurial ability is the human resource that combines other resources to produce new goods and services and bring them to market. So an entrepreneur might combine land, labor, and capital in new ways, taking risks along the way to bring a good or service to market. On the other side, we have businesses. A business is a privately owned organization that produces goods and services and then sells them. Businesses can be large, such as an automobile manufacturer, or small, such as a diner. And businesses may produce goods, such as computers and bicycles, and services, such as haircuts and car repairs. But households and businesses are not isolated. They interact in markets. At the top of the model, we have the market for resources. The market for resources is where households sell and businesses buy economic resources, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. Notice that it is households who own all the economic resources. You might think of capital, say a delivery truck, as being owned by a business. But who owns the business? You guessed it, households. Whether a small diner owned by an individual, a partnership owned by several individuals, or a corporation owned by stockholders, all of these businesses are owned by people who are also members of a household. Let's look at some transactions in the market for resources by a business. A diner. It uses a mix of economic resources, such as land, potatoes for fries, labor, cooks and waitstaff, and capital resources, kitchen equipment and cash register, to produce goods and services. In this case, cheeseburgers, fries, and milkshakes. The business buys these economic resources from households. For example, let's say you work at the diner. You are selling, and the diner is buying your labor resources. Those homemade fries come from potatoes, a natural resource bought from a local farm, which is owned by a household. The new milkshake machine and French fry cutter, capital resources, were bought from a business 3 states over, and the stockholders of that business are members of households. Finally, the diner itself is owned by Alice, who is a member of a household and an entrepreneur who has turned her skill of making the best homemade fries in town into a successful business. In exchange for their resources, households earn income. Each resource has its own income category. Households receive wages for their labor, rent for use of their land, interest for use of their capital, and profit for their entrepreneurial ability. For working at the diner, your income would be paid in the form of a paycheck at the end of the month. So, in the market for resources, households sell resources and businesses buy resources. The resources flow one way, and money flows the other. At this point in the cycle, households sell resources to businesses. So, households are holding income, and businesses are holding resources. But what do households do with the income? What do businesses do with the resources? To answer these questions, let's focus on the bottom of the model, the market for goods and services, where the goods and services produced by businesses are bought. Let's start with businesses. Businesses use the economic resources they buy in the market for resources to produce goods, such as computers and bicycles, and services, such as haircuts and car repairs. Businesses sell these goods and services to households in the market for goods and services. For example, the diner produces cheeseburgers, fries, and milkshakes. Households use part of their incomes to buy goods and services. The payment businesses receive is called revenue. For example, at the diner, revenue comes from customers paying for their food. In short, the market for goods and services is simply where the goods and services produced by businesses are bought. So in the market for goods and services, businesses sell goods and services, and households buy goods and services. Products flow one way, and money flows the other. Let's step back and notice a few things about the circular flow model. First, it shows how businesses and households interact in the two markets, the market for resources and the market for goods and services. Notice that households and businesses are both buyers and sellers. Households are sellers in the market for resources. Households sell land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability in exchange for money, which in this case is called income. Households are buyers in the market for goods and services. Households exchange income for goods and services. Businesses are sellers in the market for goods and services. Businesses sell goods and services in exchange for money, which in this case is called revenue. Businesses are buyers in the market for resources. Businesses exchange the revenue earned in the market for goods and services to buy land, labor, and capital, and entrepreneurial ability in the market for resources. In this case, the money spent is called the cost of production. Second, the model shows the flow of money in exchange for goods and services and resources. Money flows clockwise, while goods and services and resources flow counterclockwise. The circular flow model is a simple tool for learning about the economy. It shows the relationship between households and businesses and how these different decision makers in the economy fit together. Plus, it shows how money keeps the economic resources and goods and services flowing around and around and around in the economy. And that's something Alice appreciates. This video was produced by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. For more information, visit us online at stlouisfed.org.
And that is it for this video. Follow the rest of the activities that are listed on your handout, and thank you for watching.